More people from the US and the UK have received unsolicited packages containing mysterious seeds from China. Authorities warn the seeds could be invasive species. At least 55 million people have been affected by floods in China. Heavy rain is forecast for August in an even bigger area. Snowfall on a hot summer day in Beijing. Authorities denied it was snow, while netizens quote an ancient proverb that indicates some deeper meaning behind it. A corrupt official in China was found to own 36 properties across China and Australia. In the past, Chinese officials have taken bribes in the form of hundreds of houses. And TikTok CEO slams Mark Zuckerberg for his veiled criticism. On the same day, President Trump commented on a potential ban of the app. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Chinese scientist charged with visa fraud made her first court appearance this week. Tan Yuan is accused of lying on her visa application and hiding her ties to the Chinese Communist Party's military. A federal judge is ordering her to stay in jail, calling her a flight risk. Court documents show Tang applied to be a cancer researcher at UC Davis last October. She was approved a month later. On her visa application, Tang denied having ties to China's People's Liberation Army, known as the PLA. She also denied being affiliated with the Communist Party, but prosecutors say these pictures prove she has ties to both. According to the complaint, Tang was an active military personnel in the PLA, working for China's Air Force. The badge on her uniform states she's part of the Molecular Medicine Translation Center, part of the Air Force's Medical University. The FBI says Tang hid out in the Chinese consulate in San Francisco after speaking to federal agents in June. At that meeting, Tang claimed she was wearing the uniform because she'd attended a military school. She added that she didn't know what the badge on the uniform meant. U.S. Marshals arrested her late last week and booked her into Sacramento County Jail, where she is now. Tang brought her young daughter with her, a rare move for military officers. Her daughter has since been sent back to China. According to Chinese political commentators, it's a tactic used by the Chinese regime to silence Tang. Tang was among 4 arrested for visa fraud last week. She could face up to 10 years in prison and is due back in court in 2 weeks. And a new development, the Justice Department has announced that a professor at the University of Arkansas was indicted by a federal grand jury on 42 counts of wire fraud and 2 of passport fraud. The department says he failed to disclose that he was working for a Chinese university and Chinese companies during the course of securing funding for a NASA research project. It's in violation of conflict of interest policies. He wrote last June to a Xidian University researcher who intended to visit the University of Arkansas. He said, "Not many people here know I am one of them, but if this leaks out, my job here will be in deep trouble." He also asked him to delete the email after reading it for safety's sake, adding that any email can be retrieved. And a former chair of a Harvard department has been charged by U.S. prosecutors for covering up and lying about his China ties. He's the highest profile person so far to emerge from a crackdown on Chinese influence in U.S. universities.
U.S. prosecutors brought tax charges against a Harvard University professor. Charles Lieber, the former chair of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department, is accused of lying to authorities about his ties to a China-run recruitment program and funding he allegedly received from the Chinese Communist Party. The Justice Department is currently cracking down on Chinese influence within universities. The move comes as concerns about spying and intellectual property theft by the CCP are rising. Lieber's case is one of the highest-profile cases to emerge from the crackdown so far. His case centers on China's Thousand Talents program. According to U.S. authorities, China uses the program to entice overseas Chinese citizens and foreign researchers to share their knowledge with China. Prosecutors say Lieber became a strategic scientist at a Wuhan university in 2011 and later contractually participated in the Thousand Talents program. They further allege that under his contract, Lieber was paid up to $50,000 a month and living expenses of up to almost $160,000. He also was awarded more than $1.5 million to establish a research lab. In exchange, Lieber agreed to organize international conferences, publish articles, and apply for patents in the university's name.
People across the U.S. are receiving unsolicited packages from China. They appear to contain mystery seeds. Federal officials reported hundreds of the cases, while the state of Virginia says it's received over 1,000 calls and emails from seed recipients. Many of the packages have China Post written on the label, indicated of the country's state-run postal service. Officials from nearly 30 states have put up warnings, asking people not to open the packages and definitely not to plant the seeds.
At this point in time, we don't have enough information to know if this is a hoax, a prank, an internet scam, or an act of agricultural bioterrorism. But what we do know is this: unsolicited seeds could be invasive and introduce unknown diseases to local plants, harm livestock, or threaten our environment.
Seed receivers should contact the State Department of Agriculture for further instructions. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing defended the country's postal service, saying it follows all restrictions on seed deliveries. He also accused that the labels are fake and are not from China Post. U.S. authorities are currently testing the seeds. Meanwhile, the UK also got unsolicited seeds from China. The UK said it's investigating packages of seeds marked ear studs that are being sent to people in Britain. The packages mostly came from China and Southeast Asia. Local authorities warn the seeds may carry a biosecurity threat since they've bypassed the usual strict checks. Likewise, Canadian authorities wrote on Twitter that people in Canada have also been receiving unsolicited seeds, although they didn't say where the packages came from. And in Taiwan, a woman is claiming she also received a mysterious package from China. The package's label says it contains potting soil from Shanghai. Taiwan authorities are investigating the case. Now to China's flood situation. According to China's Department of Emergency Management, as of Tuesday, floods have affected about 55 million people in nearly 30 provinces. 160 people have died or gone missing. But according to our local interviews, we discovered that many death or missing person cases weren't included in the official figures. Chinese authorities say direct losses due to the flooding have reached about $2 billion. But we're unable to independently verify that number. Now we turn to the Yangtze River's third wave of flooding. For China, it's a rarity for 3 major flood waves to be recorded in July, but that's exactly what the country is facing this year. Earlier this week, the third wave of flooding reached the Three Gorges Dam. Now it's flowing downstream. It's estimated that in August, there will be at least twice as much heavy rainfall in the upstream areas of the Yangtze River. The embankments, reservoirs, and dams along the river have now been soaked by high water levels for weeks, and the risks of damage and collapse remain high. Anhui province has been hit the hardest. That's because floodwaters have been intentionally directed there by authorities trying to protect richer areas like Shanghai. Chinese media outlets didn't report every instance that authorities opened the floodgates. As a result, it's unclear how many times it was done and how many dams were opened in the province. As far as we know, the biggest floodgate opening occurred at Wangjia Dam over a week ago. About 200,000 people were affected. Floods submerged underwater, crops were soaked, houses were washed away. One fish farm alone lost 3 million fish. This is the 16th time the dam has been opened intentionally. The next most recent instance happened over a decade ago. Locals are now in a desperate situation. One elderly man said Anhui people have given up too much for people who live in other places. He also requested that if people from Anhui arrive at others' houses begging to please give them some food.
3星过后，要是有安徽人走到你家门口要饭，就请你给他一口吃了吧。
Now we turn to upstream areas. Upstream from the Three Gorges Dam in the city of Chongqing, 2 pedestrians have fallen into a sinkhole as pavement in the area collapsed. That's according to a state media report on Wednesday. Both survived the freak accident after being rescued by local firefighters. The accident was likely caused by recent torrential rains, which have softened the ground. As for future weather predictions, Chinese authorities say from Wednesday on, the band of rainfall will move northward. Predictions say the Yellow River Basin will be hit, and the regions of Sichuan, Tibet, and Xinjiang are all at high risk of mountain torrents. Elsewhere, heavy rain, thunderstorms, or hail may cause flooding in the Inner Mongolia region, as well as other provinces in northern China. On Tuesday afternoon, a Beijing citizen captured a very unusual phenomenon, snowfall, in the middle of summer. He said he was sure it was snow when he touched it, despite the day's 90-degree temperature. The snowfall lasted a full 5 minutes. In China, there's a saying, if there is unbearable injustice, it will snow in June. According to the Chinese lunar calendar, it is currently June. Some netizens mentioned the saying while commenting on the strange sight online. A state-run media also reported about the out-of-place weather. The report quoted an expert who said it wasn't snow falling but graupel. Also called soft hail, it forms when cold water droplets freeze on falling snowflakes and falls normally during winter storms. Now we turn to corruption charges in China. A Chinese Communist Party official was recently sentenced to 18 years in prison for corruption. The official, Wen Ming, was a former committee member of the party's Commission for Discipline Inspection in the Inner Mongolia region. That agency is in charge of combating corruption in the party. Chinese media reported that the official owns at least 36 properties in China and Australia, all of which are registered under the names of his relatives and friends. Wen had been claiming that he lived a simple life and didn't own any property, and that he lived in a rented house. Besides real estate, Wen also received over 40 luxury watches while in power, with the most expensive one worth about $50,000. He had also adopted various means of laundering his money. For example, he used his daughter's name to convert Chinese currency, the yuan, into US dollars, and then deposited it in a Singaporean bank. Compared with other officials, Wen doesn't come close to owning the most property. Another corrupt official reportedly owned nearly 400 houses and apartments. From his time as the party secretary of Wuhan City's railway branch to his time as railway minister, Liu Zizun took a whopping 374 properties as bribes. Combined, they're worth more than $110 million. On top of that, he also embezzled properties, cash and stocks, worth $10 million. Liu helped one businessman win contracts in the transportation industry in exchange for properties. He also helped him bribe other officials for a promotion, all the way up to railway minister. In 2013, he was sentenced to the death penalty with 2 years probation. The sentence was later reduced to life in prison. In addition to Liu, the official that ranked second in terms of owning properties had nearly 200 houses. But in contrast, Zhao Haibing's position wasn't a high one. He was a member of the party committee of the State Security Office in a southern Chinese city. Zhao's properties were also related to businessmen, and he similarly claimed that he didn't own any houses. Authorities later found that Zhao created a fake identity, which he used to register his properties. In 2013, Zhao was removed from his position. He was transferred to the judicial organs for investigation. No further reports about him are available. Another expert from Hong Kong speaks out about the CCP's cover-up of the pandemic. Professor Yuan Guoyong, whose team identified the SARS virus in 2003, suspects that the Chinese Communist Party or the CCP deliberately covered up the source of the outbreak, which is thought to be a seafood market in Wuhan. In an interview with BBC earlier this week, Professor Yuan said he joined a team of experts who were sent to Wuhan in January to inspect the site. He said he wanted to inspect the market, but it had already been disinfected. If the virus jumped from animals to humans here, crucial evidence was then lost. He said it was like the crime scene was already disturbed. The CCP did not admit there was human-to-human transmission until January 20th. But 8 days earlier, Professor Yuan had already diagnosed a family living in Shenzhen. Some of the family members had just returned from Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus. Professor Yuan said he reported it to Chinese authorities, but the CCP continued to downplay the seriousness of the new disease, despite evidence of human transmission. In less than an hour, Chongqing resident Mr. Yang's old bungalow was leveled by policemen and security guards without his consent. They used his brief visit to the doctor while he was away from his home to tear it down.
I felt ill and went to see the doctor. I left home at 9, and my home was gone when I came back at 10.
China's demolition office sent out dozens of policemen and security guards who destroyed his home with an excavator. Yang inherited his bungalow from his father. It was situated in the most prosperous area of Chongqing, a major city in China home to more than 30 million people. The municipality started demolishing old houses in the area 3 years ago, but never offered compensation or relocation plans. Nor did it acknowledge that the house was Yang's private property, so he refused to move. In order to force him out, the city cut off his water and electricity multiple times, but to no avail. Yang told us the bungalow was part of his family's private property since the 1950s. His father also owned dozens of areas of land and several watchmaking businesses. But since then, the Chinese Communist Party robbed the family of those assets in the name of joint public-private operation and land reform. They refer to two policies widely adopted by the CCP back in the 1950s. They're used to take away people's ownership and property rights. Yang's father had been sent to labor camp and later starved to death. In 1984, the bungalow was reclassified as private property, but the title certificate was never issued. Now the bungalow is gone, but Yang says he won't give up and will continue standing up for what he feels is right. The Chinese-owned social media app TikTok is now in the hot seat. It's not only dealing with government scrutiny, but also competition from U.S. big tech. Today, President Trump commented on a potential ban of the app, and Facebook CEO criticized TikTok without mentioning its name. NTD's Juliet Song has the story.
President Trump was asked on Wednesday how close he is to banning TikTok, a popular social media app owned by the Chinese developer ByteDance.
We're looking at TikTok. We're thinking about making a decision.
Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin added that the app is under the review of the Committee on Foreign Investment.
And we'll be making a recommendation to the president on it this week. So we have lots of alternatives.
The committee has the authority to review deals by foreign acquirers for potential national security risks. TikTok is a wildly popular video sharing app. It boasts over 2 billion global downloads, and U.S. users are among the top 3. Thanks to the app's global success, its Beijing-based parent company has joined the ranks of a handful of global Chinese conglomerates. But its Chinese ownership is also drawing increasing scrutiny from the U.S. government. Officials are concerned that the app could collect user data and turn it over to the Chinese regime. TikTok denies the charges, saying it never provided Beijing with user data and would not do so even if China demands it. Under Chinese law, internet companies have to hand over user data if party officials request it. TikTok is also facing pressure from big tech. In a statement, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg pointed to the threat from tech companies that don't share American values. Criticizing TikTok, but without mentioning its name, he said, China is building its own version of the internet, focused on very different ideas, and they are exporting their vision to other countries. TikTok's new CEO, Kevin Mayer, dismissed Facebook in his response. He referred to Zuckerberg's statements as maligning attacks that are disguised as patriotism and designed to put an end to our very presence in the U.S. Facebook is launching a video app similar to TikTok next month, and the company has reportedly been luring TikTok influencers onto its own platform. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Hackers linked to the Chinese Communist regime have reportedly infiltrated the Vatican's computer networks. It includes communications with the Catholic Diocese in Hong Kong. That's according to an American cybersecurity firm that tracks state-backed cyber attacks.
The company, called Recorded Future, says the attacks began in May. Among the targets was the head of the Hong Kong study mission, who is seen as the de facto representative of Pope Francis to China. The report says the targets used similar tools and methods previously identified with Chinese state-backed hacking groups. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin demanded sufficient evidence of the attack. The reported hacking follows an extremely rare meeting between Beijing and the Vatican's foreign minister earlier this year. Relations between the two have been improving, and they were expected to renew a provisional 2-year deal on the operation of the Catholic Church in China this September. A Vatican spokesperson had no immediate comment. The Hong Kong study mission didn't respond to a Reuters request for comment either.
Australian police warned students of Chinese background studying in Sydney to be aware of a virtual kidnapping scam. They say it has obtained millions in payments from unsuspecting victims.
Video released by Australian police Monday shows a disturbing sight. What appears to be a person with hands and feet bound and tied up in what police are calling a virtual kidnapping scam targeting Chinese students in Sydney. Police say the scam has already obtained millions in payments from unsuspecting victims. New South Wales official Darren Bennett explained the scam to reporters on Monday.
The offence types are very disparate in their range. They can form the intent to create a scam kidnapping where people communicate to their family overseas and pretend they've been kidnapped on instruction from a fraudster ringing them on the telephone.
Scammers call up the victims they plan to target, claiming to be from a Chinese authority like the police or tax department, according to the statement released by the NSW police. The caller then, quote, convinces the victim they have been implicated in a crime in China or that their identity has been stolen and that they must pay a fee to avoid legal action, arrest, or deportation. Bennett called the crimes, quote, egregious and very cruel. Bennett also warned that the phone calls are becoming very common and encouraged anyone receiving one not to fall for the scam.
Alarm bells were raised when a fleet of Chinese fishing boats came close to the Galapagos Islands. The authorities wish to seek international consensus on a strategy to protect the marine fauna of the region.
The Ecuadorian Navy last week identified some 260 boats which came close to the Galapagos Islands. They raised the alert to the authorities. Most of these vessels were Chinese flagged. In 2017, a Chinese vessel was captured in the Galapagos Marine Reserve with 300 tons of species. Ecuador said that it will take diplomatic steps to protect the Galapagos Islands. The country's officials will raise the issue at a meeting with delegates from Latin American countries. They wish to devise a common strategy to protect the marine fauna of the region.
As long as the diplomatic negotiation route is open, that will be the only route used in the hope, and with almost total certainty, that the problems caused by the presence of this international fishing fleet will be resolved through this channel.
The country is seeking international consensus on preventing activity near the Galapagos. With interference from ships, the delicate ecosystem of the area could be seriously affected. The archipelago has a wide variety of turtles, flamingos, and seabirds. There is also a great wealth of marine flora and fauna. The fishing fleet that was spotted had not yet entered the exclusive economic zone of the islands.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.